It's a Friday morning in July, and Main Street in Skidmore, Missouri is full of people. They've come up the street from the Legion Hall in a group, and they're standing outside the D&G Tavern, maybe 46 of them, in bright daylight. A man comes out of the bar carrying a six-pack and a pack of cigarettes. His wife is with him. He gets into the driver's seat of a Silverado parked at the curb, sets the beer down, and lights a cigarette. Nobody says anything to him. Nobody has to. The back window of the truck comes apart. Shots come in from behind and from the side, and the man is hit in the head and the neck, and it's over in a few seconds. His wife is in the passenger seat, untouched. Someone opens her door and pulls her out and walks her away from the truck. And then the street empties. Nobody calls an ambulance. Rex McElroy sits dead at the wheel in the middle of Main Street, with the engine still running and his foot still on the gas, and the town of Skidmore goes home. 2 different rifles were fired that morning. Investigators recover evidence of at least 2 weapons, which means at least 2 shooters, which means at least 2 people standing on that street knew exactly what they had just done. Every person on it told investigators the same thing. They hadn't seen it. They'd been facing the other way. They'd heard shots but couldn't say from where. A county grand jury returned nothing. The FBI worked the case. A federal grand jury heard it and returned nothing. It is still open right now, more than 40 years later, and nobody has ever been charged. Here's the number that explains how a town gets to that morning. Over roughly 20 years, Ken McElroy was charged with 21 felonies. He was convicted once. Skidmore in 1981 was a farming town of a few hundred people in the northwest corner of Missouri, up near the Nebraska line. 1 main street, a tavern, a grocery, a bank, a couple of churches, the kind of place where you know every vehicle by the sound of it. McElroy was born nearby, one of a large family of tenant farmers, and he'd left school young. By adulthood, he had settled into a career, and the career was theft. Livestock, grain, antiques, guns, farm equipment. He was good at it in a way people in the area found grudgingly impressive. He knew the roads. He knew which farms were empty and when, and he moved what he took fast. He was also physically imposing, and he liked people to know it. He drove a pickup with a rifle in the rack. He kept a lot of dogs. He was, by every account, entirely unbothered by whether anyone liked him. So, 21 felonies, 1 conviction. And it's worth being clear that this is not a story about a lazy small-town sheriff. The cases were brought. Prosecutors filed them. What happened is that they came apart. And they came apart the same way every time. McElroy had a method, and he had a lawyer, and the 2 worked together. The lawyer was a well-known Missouri defense attorney named Richard McFadden, out of Kansas City, and he was very good at his job. He knew how to get continuances. He knew how to stretch a case out over months and then years. That was the point, because time was what the method needed. The method itself was simple. McElroy would find out who was going to testify against him. Then he would drive to that person's house and park in front of it, and he wouldn't do anything. That was the entire point. He'd sit in the truck with the rifle visible in the rack, sometimes for hours, sometimes all night. And he'd look at the house, then he'd leave. Then a few days later, he'd come back and do it again. Sometimes he'd mention around town in passing that he knew which school somebody's kids went to. He'd say it pleasantly. Cattle would go missing from a witness's farm. A barn would burn. A dog would get shot. Nothing that could be tied to him. And nothing that needed to be, because everybody understood exactly what it was. Do that for 8 months while your lawyer files continuances, and by the time the case gets to trial, your witness has moved away, or has developed a genuinely poor memory of the whole thing, or just doesn't show up. And a case with no witnesses isn't a case. He's reported to have burned down a barn belonging to a local judge. Whether that's provable is another question. But the fact that people in the county believed it tells you what the air felt like there. The pattern held for 2 decades. Charge, delay, intimidate, dismiss. The town watched it happen over and over and drew the only available conclusion, which was that the law did not apply to this man. I'm going to describe one thing about McElroy plainly and then move on, because it matters for what the town eventually did, and because dwelling on it doesn't help anybody. He married several times, and one of those marriages was to a girl named Trina. She was 12 when he took up with her. He was 35 and married to somebody else at the time. When her parents objected, their house burned down and the family dog was shot. Trainer had a child at 14 and briefly ran home. The house burned a second time. She was placed in foster care, and the foster parents were threatened until she was handed back. McElroy then married her, which under Missouri law at the time meant she could not be made to testify against him. That's the point where the town's view of him changed. He stopped being the man who stole your hogs. He became something they had no category for at all. The last case started over a piece of candy. In the summer of 1980, one of McElroy's kids was in the grocery store on Main Street, owned by a couple named Ernest and Lois Bowenkamp. Ernest went by Bo. He was 70 years old. A clerk accused the child of taking candy without paying and said something about it. The child went home, and McElroy did what McElroy did, which was to make it the family's problem for months. He parked outside the Bowenkamp's house at night and sat there. He made phone calls. This ran through the summer and into the fall, and the Bowenkamps, who were in their 70s, went to the authorities and got nowhere, because everybody had been going to the authorities about this man for 20 years. On the evening of July the 8th, 1980, McElroy came around the back of the store with a shotgun. There was an argument. He shot Bo Bowenkamp in the neck. Bowenkamp survived, which is the only reason there was ever a trial. And here the pattern finally broke partly. McElroy was charged, and this time the witness was a 70-year-old man who'd been shot in the throat in his own store and who did not scare off. Lois Bowenkamp didn't either, through all the visits and the calls that kept coming the whole way through. In June 1981, McElroy was convicted of second-degree assault and sentenced to 2 years for shooting an elderly man in the neck. And then he appealed, and he was released on bond pending appeal, which meant he walked out of the courthouse and went home. That's the moment the town understood the system wasn't going to fix this. Not eventually, not slowly, not at all, because he didn't lie low. Within days, he was back in the D&G tavern with an M1 Garand and a bayonet fixed to it, telling a room full of people what he intended to do to Bo Bowenkamp. There's a detail here that matters. Showing up armed and making threats while free on bond is about as clean a bond violation as exists. A hearing was scheduled to revoke it, got continued. So on the morning of July the 10th, 1981, a group of townspeople met at the Legion Hall to talk about what to do. Somewhere between 30 and 60 people, depending on which account you read. The county sheriff, Danny Estes, was there. They asked him what they were supposed to do about a man who had threatened to kill Bo Bowenkamp and was walking around town armed. What they got was a suggestion to organize a neighborhood watch, to take turns keeping an eye on the Bowenkamp's place. And then somebody came in and said McElroy had just pulled up outside the D&G. The sheriff left town. He said since that he had to go pick something up, that it was routine, that he had no idea what was coming. Maybe that's true. What isn't in dispute is that the meeting was about McElroy, arrived while the meeting was happening, and the county's senior law enforcement officer got in his car and drove out of Skidmore. The room emptied and walked up the street. McElroy and Trina were inside. He bought the six-pack and the cigarettes. The bar filled up around him with men who had been at that meeting, and nobody said a word to him. And then he walked out to the truck. You know what happens next. It's where we started. What matters is what happened after. Trina named a man. She said she'd seen him fire, and she said it consistently, and she kept saying it for years. It went nowhere, and why it went nowhere is what makes this case what it is. The man she named had an alibi. He also had corroboration from the town. So did the second man who came under suspicion. Investigators interviewed dozens of people who had been standing on that street in full daylight, and what they got back was a wall, not silence, exactly. People talked. By most accounts, they were perfectly pleasant about it. They just hadn't seen anything. They'd been facing the other way. They'd ducked. They'd heard it, but couldn't place where it came from. 46 people, one street, one truck, no obstructions, not one usable eyewitness account. A county grand jury declined to indict. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation on the theory that a coordinated killing might amount to a conspiracy to deprive McElroy of his rights, and a federal grand jury heard evidence in 1985. It declined too. Investigators believed then, and believe now, that a number of those 46 people knew exactly who fired. Nobody has ever broken. The usual way to tell this story is to stop right here and call it frontier justice. A town pushed past its limit, handling something the law wouldn't handle. That's the version most retellings land on, and it isn't wrong exactly. It's just incomplete, because it treats July 10th as an ending. For Skidmore, it was closer to a beginning. The town became, immediately and permanently, the place where they killed that man. Reporters came, books got written, documentary crews turned up, and people who had spent 20 years being terrorized found out that the outside world was much less interested in what McElroy had done to them than in what they had done to him, and the wall that protected the shooters sealed the town in with them. Because the thing about 46 people agreeing to say nothing is that they all still live there. Every one of them knows that somebody in the grocery store, in the next pew, at the school pickup, pulled the trigger. Nobody can ask. Nobody can be told. It sits underneath every ordinary conversation in a town of a few hundred people permanently. And Skidmore has not had a quiet 40 years since. In 2000, a young man named Branson Perry vanished from his home there and has never been found. In 2001, a woman named Wendy Gillenwater was beaten to death by her boyfriend. In 2004, Bobby Jo Stinnett, 8 months pregnant, was murdered in her Skidmore home by a woman who cut the baby from her body and took it. Those cases have nothing to do with McElroy. There's no line connecting them, and it would be dishonest to draw one. But the press connected them anyway, because a town where 46 people once saw nothing is an irresistible frame, and Skidmore has spent 4 decades unable to get out from under it. The population in 1981 was around 440. It's under 250 now. That's the cost nobody puts in the retellings. The town won. McElroy was gone. The man who'd made 20 years of their lives unbearable was never coming back, and not one of them went to prison for it. They just had to become a town that keeps a secret and stay that way forever.